Imagine stepping into a high-stakes international language exam. Your heart is pounding, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Your palms are sweating, and you are just desperately trying to remember like the most complex vocabulary words you studied.
Yeah, you're trying to retrieve all those flashcards.
Exactly. And then the examiner looks at you, and instead of demanding some, philosophical thesis, they essentially just want to know if you enjoy taking a walk or listening to a podcast.
It's almost jarring how simple it can be.
It really is. So today, we are taking a very slow, very intentional deep dive into a fascinating piece of material.
We really are.
We're looking at a highly requested English-speaking practice session, and it's tailored specifically for IELTS preparation.
Right, specifically targeting bands 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah, and keeping with the beautifully calming energy of this particular source material, we're deliberately slowing our pace today.
I love that. Let's just all take a collective breath.
Exactly. Take a deep breath. We want to unpack this material mindfully, to uncover the hidden mechanics of language fluency. And the mission today is to show that fluency is, well, surprisingly, not about being perfect.
It is a perfect day to adopt that peaceful cadence, I think. This material is just intriguing because it targets learners aiming for those higher IELTS bands.
Which is quite an advanced level, right?
It is. For context, if you're unfamiliar with that grading matrix, reaching those bands means taking a learner from being a generally competent speaker who still makes noticeable mistakes, all the way up to a highly fluent, advanced user of the language.
That's a huge leap.
It's a massive leap, but the instructor here takes a completely counterintuitive approach to reaching that advanced level.
How so?
Well, they do not start with complex grammar rules. They start by addressing the intense psychological barriers of learning.
Yes, exactly. Before the practical exercises even begin, the framework addresses that really heavy, lingering anxiety.
The fear of making a mistake.
Right. The worry about pronunciation. Or just the absolute dread of being halfway through a sentence and, suddenly forgetting your words.
Oh, that paralyzing moment.
Right, leading to that thought of, like, what if I am simply not good enough to do this? Anyone who is trying to learn a new language, or honestly any complex new skill, recognizes that exact flavor of imposter syndrome.
And understanding the mechanics of that anxiety is crucial. When a learner feels that dread, their brain enters a state of cognitive overload.
Like it's just trying to process too much at once.
Precisely. They're usually trying to do a tremendous amount of mental math. They're hearing a question in English, translating it into their native language, formulating an answer in their native language.
That sounds exhausting.
It is, and then translating that answer back into English, all while trying to apply, a dozen grammar rules.
Right.
That constant internal translation creates a processing delay. You freeze up because your working memory is just completely overwhelmed.
Okay, I have to challenge the premise slightly, though. If someone is sitting for the IELTS, they are literally being graded.
True.
It is an exam. So how can a learner just, let go of that anxiety when perfection actually feels like the entire point of the interaction?
Well, that is the core myth this material seeks to dismantle. The foundational philosophy here is that fluency is not, it's not an academic test of perfection.
Okay, what is it then?
It is an act of athletic muscle memory combined with psychological vulnerability.
Athletic muscle memory. That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah. The examiners are not looking for flawless robotic perfection. They do not want perfectly memorized, scripted answers that sound like they came from a textbook.
Right.
They are evaluating your ability to engage in a human connection. Can you communicate naturally? Can you recover from a stumble? Can you simply keep the conversation flowing?
Okay, let's look at the underlying mechanics of that, because it shifts the entire goalpost.
It really does.
If fluency isn't about being a walking dictionary, what is it? It makes me think about how we acquire physical skills, like learning to ride a bike.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. You cannot learn to ride a bicycle perfectly in a straight line on your first try. You just can't.
No, you'd fall right over.
Exactly. And more importantly, no one expects you to. The wobbling is a physical requirement of finding your balance.
Yes.
The wobble is actually proof that your brain is making real-time neurological adjustments. It means you're learning.
Precisely. And this material tells learners that in spoken language, a grammatical error or a paused word is just a wobble.
Just a wobble. I love that.
It is not a crash. It is just proof of forward motion. The framework encourages learners to gently train their minds to bypass that exhausting translation process and begin thinking directly in the target language.
Which feels much more peaceful.
It does. Real fluency is a state of flow, and you can only enter a flow state when you feel safe enough to wobble. The instructor explicitly creates this safe space, reassuring learners that mistakes are a deeply necessary part of the architecture of learning.
But, lowering that anxiety and aiming for a flow state requires a very specific type of practice.
It does.
You can't just tell someone, like, hey, don't be anxious, and expect them to suddenly speak fluently.
If only it were that easy.
Right. So how exactly does this framework recommend training the actual vocal cords to achieve this athletic muscle memory?
Well, this is where we arrive at the core technique championed in the material. It's a method called shadowing.
Shadowing, okay.
Shadowing is remarkably elegant in its simplicity, but the neurological benefits only happen if you follow the mechanics very mindfully.
Mindfully, so slowing it down.
Exactly. It is broken down into a deliberate three-step process.
Okay, walk me through it.
Step 1 asks you to listen carefully to a provided question and answer, but, and this is a very strict rule, you must listen without repeating it straight away.
Wait, really? That feels incredibly counterintuitive.
I know, it really does.
Usually a learner's first instinct is to immediately mimic whatever they hear to, prove they caught it.
It is a very common instinct, but holding back is essential. By simply listening first, you remove the immediate pressure of performance. So you create a moment of pure absorption. And this leads right into step 2. While you are in that quiet listening phase, you are asked to notice the fine details.
Like what kind of details?
You pay attention to the specific pronunciation. You feel the natural rhythm of the sentence. You listen to how the words physically connect and blend together rather than hearing them as isolated, choppy blocks of sound.
Okay, I have to push back here, though.
Sure, go ahead.
Shadowing, on its surface, sounds a lot like rote memorization. If I am just sitting there parroting someone else's audio, aren't I training myself to be a robot rather than a natural dynamic speaker?
That's a fair question.
Like, how does repeating a script lead to authentic fluency?
That is a very valid skepticism.
Huh.
But there is a profound difference between mimicking rhythm and memorizing text.
Okay, explain that.
When you engage in step 3, which is finally repeating the answer out loud, you are not trying to memorize the vocabulary for a test.
Right.
You are trying to copy the rising and falling intonation, the pace, and the emotional resonance of the speaker. You are training the physical muscles in your jaw, your tongue, and your vocal cords to form these sounds smoothly.
Oh, so it's a physical workout.
Exactly. By using a provided script for this exercise, you temporarily remove the cognitive load of having to invent what to say. Your brain doesn't have to search for words, so 100% of your mental energy can go toward the physical feeling of speaking naturally.
That makes total sense. You isolate the variables, you take away the stress of vocabulary creation,
Yep.
so the physical mechanics of speaking can become automatic.
You've got it.
But let's consider the vulnerability aspect again. What if a learner is sitting alone in their room, and they try this, but their voice shakes because they feel silly?
Which happens a lot.
Yeah. Or what if they simply do not possess the refined British accent that the instructor is modeling in the audio?
The instructor addresses this with deep empathy, actually, setting very comforting ground rules.
That's good to hear.
First, they emphasize that a perfect British accent is completely unnecessary. Your unique voice with your natural accent is entirely valid and welcomed by examiners.
That is so reassuring.
And second, there is absolutely no timeline. If you cannot keep up with the pace of the recorded sentence, the instruction is simply to pause, gently rewind, and listen again. There is no rush.
There is no rush. Just hearing that phrase lowers the heart rate.
Doesn't it?
But there is one absolute non-negotiable instruction the framework gives that drives this whole mindful process. The instructor pleads with the learner, saying, "Please don't just watch, speak with me."
Yes. Because language acquisition is ultimately a physical reality. You cannot learn to speak silently no matter how much you comprehend intellectually.
Right. The brain only becomes truly comfortable with the act of speaking when the physical vocal cords are actually vibrating. You have to feel the words in your mouth.
Exactly.
But lowering this cognitive load and training those muscles only works if the practice material itself is designed properly. Let's look at the actual practice scenarios this framework uses to subtly reprogram the learner's psychology.
Let's do that. The material provides 10 specific IELTS Part 1 questions with sample answers to shadow.
10 questions, okay.
And if we look at how these questions are structured, they aren't random. They are thematically designed to build confidence. Let's look at the first theme, which focuses entirely on basic identity and origin.
Right, the questions here are incredibly simple. Could you tell me your name, please? Can I see your identification, please? And where are you from?
Very foundational.
Yeah, and the shadowed answers are very grounded, like, my name is Tara. Of course, here you are. I'm from England. It's a beautiful country with a rich culture and friendly people.
We need to look at why the framework starts here. In linguistics, there's a concept called the affective filter.
The affective filter, what's that?
It essentially means that when a learner is stressed, an emotional block prevents them from absorbing or producing language. Their amygdala, the fear center of the brain, is highly active.
Ah, so they're in fight or flight mode.
Exactly. By starting a high-stakes exam with the absolute most basic facts of a person's existence, their name and their home, you bypass that fear response. The learner isn't struggling to think of an abstract idea.
So the cognitive load is virtually zero.
Yes, which gently lowers the affective filter and calms the amygdala. The instructor even explicitly tells the learner to substitute their own name and country, immediately grounding the practice in their own safe reality.
It is a psychological warm-up. You are convincing your brain that speaking English is safe.
That's a great way to put it.
Once that baseline is established, the framework moves to a second theme, which is psychological priming.
Right.
These are questions about current states and motivations, asking if the learner works or studies, why they are learning English, and what their ultimate goal is.
And notice the architecture of the provided answers here. For being a student, the learner shadows the phrase, I'm really enjoying this stage of my life because I'm learning something new every day.
That's very positive.
It is. And for their ultimate goal, they shadow, to communicate confidently with people from around the world and use English naturally in everyday life.
I find this deeply fascinating.
Why is that?
Because the framework is effectively feeding the learner positive affirmations in the guise of language practice. You aren't just practicing sentence structure.
Oh, you're right.
You are repeatedly, physically saying out loud that you enjoy learning and that you are going to communicate confidently with the world. You are actively speaking your own success into existence, which builds immense psychological resilience over time.
It is brilliant psychological design. And that brings us to the third theme, which might be the most impactful meta moment in the entire practice session.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
It addresses the struggle itself.
Yes. The question asked is, which part of English do you find the most difficult?
A very common question.
Right. And the shadowed answer the learner must speak is, I'd say speaking is the most challenging because it requires confidence as well as language skills. The framework literally forces the learner to acknowledge out loud that the exact thing they are doing in that very moment is difficult.
Think about the mechanics of shame in learning. When we find something hard, we often feel isolated, as if we are the only ones struggling.
Definitely.
By stating the difficulty plainly and out loud, it completely removes the shame. It normalizes the struggle.
It's so validating.
It really is. And immediately following that, the learner is asked how they are improving. The answer they shadow is, I practice shadowing every day. Listening and repeating helps me improve my pronunciation and speak more naturally.
The learner is using the shadowing technique to describe the benefits of the shadowing technique itself.
Very meta.
It is a beautiful self-reinforcing loop. Finally, the material moves to the fourth theme, which I call the mundane. It asks about daily habits and what the learner does in their downtime.
The provided answers focus on practicing every day, even for just a few minutes. And for free time, the answers describe reading, listening to podcasts, and going for long walks to relax after a busy day.
This is exactly what I was referring to at the beginning of our deep dive. It is so striking how wonderfully mundane these answers are.
They really are just ordinary activities.
Yeah. If you are preparing for a major academic hurdle like the IELTS, your anxiety tells you that you must craft highly complex philosophical essays to prove your worth to the examiner.
Because anxiety always overcomplicates things.
Precisely. But these answers are just natural, easy conversational responses about taking walks and enjoying podcasts.
Right.
It proves that the ultimate marker of advanced fluency is not complexity. It is ease. The examiner just wants to see a human being comfortable in their own skin, capable of everyday human connection.
But, understanding that ease is one thing, making it permanent is another.
Very true.
How does this framework suggest a learner take these perfectly designed practice scenarios and actually move forward? How do we ensure these patterns lock into long-term memory?
Well, the path forward relies on a very specific rule regarding how the brain absorbs new information. The instructor emphasizes a concept mentioned in the practice itself: consistency over intensity.
From a neuroplasticity standpoint, this is absolutely essential. The instructor makes it clear that binge study, like sitting down for 4 exhausting hours once a week, is vastly less effective than practicing every single day,
Even if this is just for a few minutes.
especially if it's just for a few mindful minutes. The brain needs regular, small doses of exposure to build those new neural pathways. It is about making the language a daily habit, almost like a small daily breathing exercise for your cognitive muscles.
Just a few minutes a day removes so much of the overwhelming pressure.
It makes it manageable.
But we have to circle back to my earlier concern about memorization.
Okay, let's hear it.
If a learner spends every single day shadowing these exact phrases about podcasts and walks, how do they avoid just becoming a parrot? When they get to the real exam, the examiner might ask them about something completely different, like their favorite type of weather or a childhood memory.
Right. This is where the instructor gives their final and perhaps most vital piece of advice. They explicitly warn the learner. Never memorize these specific answers word for word.
Oh, really?
Yes. Shadowing is not about committing a script to memory. The goal is to learn the underlying sentence patterns. You absorb the structure. You notice how the vocabulary links together. You feel the rhythm of the pronunciation.
I see.
But when it comes time for the real test or a real conversation out in the world, you must substitute the facts with your own truth. You must use your own words.
You know, this reminds me so much of the mechanics behind playing jazz music.
Oh, that is a beautiful comparison. Walk me through how you see that connection.
Well, when a musician is learning to play jazz, they spend countless hours practicing scales.
Right.
They play the same sequences over and over again to learn the underlying structure of the chords.
Mm.
But they do not practice those scales, so they can go out on stage and simply play a rigid scale for the audience.
Oh, nobody wants to hear that.
Exactly. And they certainly don't memorize someone else's famous solo just to play it exactly the same way every time. They learn the musical pattern so deeply that it becomes pure muscle memory in their fingers.
No, I love this.
They do that, so when it is finally their turn to step up to the microphone, they have the structural tools to improvise naturally. They know the boundaries of the structure well enough to completely let go and express their own unique, spontaneous sound.
That is a perfect translation of this linguistic concept. The shadowing technique provides the musical scales. The grammatical structures and the gentle intonations become the muscle memory in your vocal cords. So that when the examiner asks you an unexpected question, you aren't freezing up in a panic, frantically searching your brain for a grammar rule. You are simply playing the music of your own thoughts, improvising naturally within a structure you already trust.
It is a deeply liberating way to view the study process. It isn't about restriction. It is about building the scaffolding for ultimate freedom.
And to ensure that this daily practice doesn't feel isolating, the framework builds a sense of community and accountability right into the end of the process.
Oh, how do they do that?
The instructor asks the learners to comment their specific target score, whether that is a band 6, 7, or 8, and to type the word done when they finish the daily practice.
It seems like such a small act, just typing a single word. But publicly writing done is a way of validating your own effort.
It really is.
It proves to yourself that you showed up today, that every single spoken sentence, every wobble as you try to find your balance, is one tangible step closer to the quiet, unshakable confidence you are trying to build.
Exactly. It reinforces the reality that fluency isn't a final destination where you suddenly become flawless and never make another mistake.
Right, there's no perfect finish line.
Fluency is a daily practice of showing up, physically using your voice, and being willing to be seen and heard, imperfections and all.
We have journeyed through some truly profound concepts today. Let's gently summarize the mindful path we've walked in this deep dive.
Let's do it.
We started by dismantling the myth of perfection, learning that true fluency is an act of authentic human connection, not an academic performance.
A connection, not a performance.
Exactly. We explored the neurological mechanics of shadowing, the vital importance of listening deeply to lower the affective filter, and the necessity of physically vibrating our vocal cords to build athletic muscle memory.
The scales of language.
Yes. And we saw how the power of small, daily, consistent practice allows us to learn the patterns of language deeply, like those jazz scales, ultimately giving us the tools to improvise our own natural conversations.
It has been a deeply reassuring and clarifying exploration.
It truly has. As you go about the rest of your day, I want to invite you to maintain this slow, peaceful tone. Take another deep breath.
Trust yourself.
Trust yourself. Whatever new skill you are working on right now, whether you are learning a language, picking up an instrument, or stepping into a completely new role in your life,
Yeah.
give yourself the grace to wobble. Trust that the wobble is just proof that you are moving forward.
And as you think about stepping into those new spaces, I would love to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Please do.
If true fluency is fundamentally about natural, vulnerable human communication rather than perfectly memorized grammar rules, how much of your true, authentic personality is just waiting to be unlocked in a new language, simply by letting go of the need to be perfect?
What a beautiful, expansive question to carry with us. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today.
Mm-hmm.
Take care of yourself, trust the process, and most importantly, keep using your voice.